Hello boys and girls, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Good to see everybody. Today, the final piece of the IGN first content went up today, a Ask Me Anything with Sean Murray. And I kind of wanted to highlight some of the takeaways. I did manage to pull about 10 of them from the article, or from the list of questions and answers that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. Now, some of this stuff may have already been discussed before, and maybe he's expanding on them a little bit more. There's a couple of things that I pull out of this that were actually at least new information or at least confirmation of something that we kind of assumed was happening. But why don't we get into it? So first, to warn you, there's probably going to be some speculation from me, so if you're okay with that, carry on. But let's talk about the first takeaway. So the first takeaway being about the release date. That's literally the first question that was answered. User asks, obviously, we're all dying to know when we'll finally be able to get our hands on No Man's Sky. Any update on when you all might have an update? In the meantime, what's it like for the studio, etc., etc. The big takeaway that I took away from that is that we can't announce anything right now because of the things that are not entirely in our control. Honestly, for good reason, but it'll be announced as soon as we can. So what that tells me, the big one that's pointing out the importance of that answer is that it's not entirely in their control. So speculation warning, this has every bit to do with Sony, I believe. Sony right now, I believe, is working on a marketing plan. They're working on how they're going to distribute the game, physical, digital, pricing, things like that. So really, they're using this as a gauge of interest. IGN first, I believe, is probably going to play a huge part in that. So we'll probably end up finding out very shortly, though. Gamescom is next week. There's a Sony event in Paris coming, and then of course the PlayStation Experience probably happening again in November of this year. But hopefully we'll probably know more about the release date before then. Second one was VR support. He really quickly touched on that and said that he can't really say anything about right now, but he's really excited about it, and that tells me. And we've seen Hello Games playing around with VR in their offices before, so we can pretty much bet that VR is going to be a sure thing. Third big takeaway that I took away is the types of stars and other anomalies that we could potentially run across in No Man's Sky. So the question was basically asked, what kind of things can we run into? For example, will we see star nebulas and massive stars, red giants, red supergiants, and I would encourage you to Google all of those things if you're not familiar with those. They're pretty mind-blowing. Really, the scale of space is mind-blowing in and of itself. But back on topic, things like supernovas, white dwarfs, etc. And he answers that a big quote that I took away from this. So for instance, a black hole could be really cool for gameplay, but maybe a supernova isn't so much. So what he's trying to say is that you might run across some of those things, but they're balancing the idea of what is cool and what is fun with gameplay and not really paying too much attention to when it comes to the science piece of it. They don't want to get so scientific about it that it just kind of puts a damper on the fun. Fourth takeaway, colorful space versus darkness. So you'll notice when he's in the galactic star map and we're sort of zooming around in this seemingly vast, endless space of stars and colorful gases and dust everywhere, is that everything is just so blah, color in your face. And the person asking the question was asking, how are we ever going to see darkness in space? Are we ever just going to have just stars kind of littering the screen without all kinds of color being vomited into your face? And he answers that in saying, while we've focused on showing our more vibrant systems in the past, and they are more interesting to discover, if you want to see blackness in space, I think if you're willing to explore, you'll find it. And I think in some previous trailers or some previous IGN first content, we saw there were some pieces of darkness in there that that's again speculation from me, so I don't know how total darkness that could be, but hey, if you're willing to go find it, there it is. So they pretty much hints that that's what's there. Big question for takeaway number 5 was sea depths. We've been asking this question a lot. We got a little bit of a presentation before for the previous IGN content for sea depth, but the question was asked, how deep can the seas go? I mean, what can we find down there? Specifically, the question says, when a player dives into the ocean, can it be deep enough to go into complete darkness, like trenches, and see scary fish and stuff like that? His answer, I found, was pretty interesting, and it actually gives a confirmation to one of my biggest questions. So his answer basically says, some seas can be very deep, yes, and they can get so deep that they can turn dark. So obviously the deeper you go into an ocean, the less likely that light can pierce that thickness of water. So here's the big one. The big takeaway that I took away from this question was you will have a light on your suit that'll help you see, which is awesome. So I this was a safe assumption to me that I figured that we could make, was that you have a light because you have all these caves and things to explore. You know, why not have a light to do that? So thanks for confirming that. That's awesome. The next one, weather, number 6, were things like rain, dust storms, snow, blizzards. The question was asking, what can we expect in any regard to extreme weather? And his answer was, well, you'll see things like rain and dust storms. That'll be pretty cool. Snow, blizzards, storms. So it'd be really cool to see a thunderstorm on some of these planets, and a bunch of other things that are possible. So there are also more alien weather types, effectively like radioactive and toxic hazards. Atmospheres that are made of different compositions to ours, things that can make things a little bit of a pain for you when it comes to exploration. But he also highlighted that it is in a simulation. They're not trying to go full on deep with these things, but they are trying to recreate every possible natural disaster that seems feasible, it sounds. Number 7, this one's a big one for me, and I think we're going to circle back to this one a little bit later because there's some really interesting info if you really look deep in this. But the question comes post-release. What are you doing for the game after it launches? So the question was, are there some features in No Man's Sky that you want to add, but you're not able to due to certain limitations or certain things? And he really goes on to say that, first off, that's an awful question because really, if you ask a developer any kind of question like that, they're going to say, everything? So be careful about asking those kinds of questions, because if you have the time, they're going to tell you everything they wish they could have put in the game and inevitably could not have. But here's the important information about it. He answers and says, but I really hope that No Man's Sky is successful enough to allow us to add even just some of the extra things that we're talking about in the studio, or the things that the community will come up with, hopefully. So what he's saying is he's hoping that No Man's Sky is successful enough to justify further support and adding extra features to the game long term, and not just doing that day one patch and shoveling it out and moving on to the next adventure, right? So that's a big one too. More on that here in a few moments. But number 8, Galactic Map bookmarks and waypoints. So every planet you visit will be recorded on your Galactic Map, which captures all of this information as you go along. So you'll always have a record of where you've been. You can also use it to set waypoints, which will help you navigate by showing you routes, however you say that word, and your current hyperdrive can manage. So what he's saying is that we kind of talked about this on Cobra TV the other night too, which was the question was, can we kind of keep like a Pokédex of the planet that we're the planets that we've been exploring, have like a planet favorites list, so you can just pull it out and show some buddies that, hey, this was my favorite planet out of the 40 million that I discovered so far. So very cool there. And then number 9, somebody asked him, what is the thing you're most excited about No Man's Sky right now? His answer was, well, any given moment he's really excited about the one thing he's working on, but he highlighted a really cool point that said, honestly, right now, there's a bit of maths, that's plural, math, that I'm working on that will really increase the variation you see on the planets, or at least give you more interesting variation. So what he's doing is he's trying to enhance and increase the variation of the planet so you aren't landing and well, wasn't this the planet I landed on about 8 planets ago? This is crazy. So that's cool to me too, because when you have a game like this, the idea is that you don't want to just have this huge template to just paint planets on and then have everything kind of look the same. So the familiarity in a big universe like this might be a problem. And then of course, number 10, my big thing, my favorite thing, and I think the thing that we should all keep in mind, in my opinion, would be the release date tension that they have and the post-launch. So we're circling back to post-launch because I think there was an even bigger highlight He actually answered this in the first question, but I felt it was so important that we should save it for the end. But somebody had basically asked him for the first question. They had said, when's the release date? What's going on? So he expanded on it after he talked about why he couldn't talk about a release date yet, which was really a non-answer, but he really couldn't say why just yet. But the big one that I took away was the reality is we couldn't ease off enough because nobody wants to get No Man's Sky out there in the world more than we do. Here's the big thing. Here's where it gets good. You talk to anyone here, and they'll whisper about their post-launch finger quotes thing. The sacrifices that'll end, or that one thing we so desperately want to do, but is on hold until after the game is shipped. We've pretty much all had our recurring dreams and nightmares about that moment of uploading the final build. So this tells me a few things. Firstly, this goes back to when Danny O'Dwyer did their feature on No Man's Sky, the next big game, I believe they called it, where Sean talked about already having a roadmap for the game once it launches of things they want to patch in later. He was very clear in saying he does not want the game to have DLC. He wants it to continue to have continual support of adding features, a bit like Minecraft. Anybody who has ever bought Minecraft has not had to spend an extra penny to partake in some of the extra content that the game has been continuously getting. So that's a big thing. So what he's saying is they're all very excited about that thing that they get to work on after the game is launched. So they've already got a perfectly mapped out idea of what they want to put in the game once it releases. So that goes back to the point that says, hey, let's make No Man's Sky successful so we can have those things. Because if it sells 500,000 units and nobody cares about it, they're probably going to just move on. And then of course, the last piece, which I think is very important, that says we've pretty much all had recurring dreams and nightmares about that moment of uploading the final build. Again, speculation warning, but what that tells me is we're close, folks. There were some hints on Twitter about the studio just sharing tons and tons of cake. Again, that speculation that says, hey, maybe they're celebrating a cool milestone or even the game going gold. We don't know as of yet, but that tells me they're getting close and they're sweating. They are super stressed about this last stretch of time. So, folks, let me know what you thought of the video. Again, thanks for joining and watching. Any other comments or whatever that you'd like to put in the comment section below, please do. Please like and share and subscribe. And look forward to future content about No Man's Sky and other cool stuff later down the road. Y'all be good.